are again out in the bush. Welcome to the Sandton Times podcast, episode 33, week 46 of 2020. I can see the end of the year is nigh, but for the time being, we're out here in the Sabre Sand Private Game Reserve. I'm going to tell you a little bit more in a few minutes why we're here, what we're doing here. It's really great to be out here. It's unbelievably hot, but it's wonderful being out in nature. If you want to connect with us, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect with us on Telegram and social media using @Sandton Times. You can visit the blog at www.sandtontimes.co.za, and you can subscribe, share, leave a review or rating for this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Yeah, welcome to our listeners in Greater Sandton and beyond. There's always so many people listening from all over the place, not just Sandton, and that includes Qatar and Brazil for this past week, so thank you to you. All is well in Sandton land, and yeah, I'm not close to my DeLonghi coffee this week as we are on the road, but you know that they keep fueling this podcast and making sure that you get the freshest and hottest, not just coffee, but news from Sandton. And they've also got a great promotion running, which ends on the 20th of November. That's like next week. So if you haven't entered this competition, go onto their Instagram page, enter the competition. You can win a Perfecto Evo Bean to Cup coffee machine. Do it. You don't want to miss out on this. Make sure that you're part of it. We're on the road again with our mobile studio for more travel, taking you to a few great destinations as we get to see firsthand what travel and tourism looks like as we open up even more. Some great news this week on lockdown as international travel is back on the cards. It's interesting to see how things are working under COVID-19 and beyond. If you have access to YouTube this week, you will be able to watch and listen to this week's podcast to get a bit of a feel of our surroundings, where we are, why are there so many background noises, and if you do hear those ambient sounds, well, we are on location at Simbambili Game Lodge, a Thornybush luxury game lodge in the famous Sabre Sand Game Reserve, which is not too far from the Kruger National Park. It's actually part of the Greater Kruger. So if you're not from South Africa, if you haven't visited this part of South Africa yet, well, that's where we are. It's the place to visit right now. Let me tell you, if you are South African, especially if you're South African, it is the best time to come visit in terms of great rates. It's not ridiculously busy. You've got plenty of social distancing. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce my first guest for this week. And joining me is Tania Cowden, the Lodge Manager here at Simbambili Game Lodge in the Sabre Sands. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Tania, it's wonderful to have you on, and thank you so much for hosting us here for this podcast.
It really is a great pleasure. Good to have you with us.
So Tania, tell us a little bit more. I think one of the things we need to clarify first off is how everything fits together. People know the Sabre Sands, people know Thornybush, people know Simbambili Game Lodge, but now how does it all piece together?
Alrighty, so Simbambili Game Lodge is a private lodge in the Sabre Sand Game Reserve. So our location is in the Sabre Sand. However, we are part of the Thornybush collections. Our marketing and our reservations falls within the Thornybush group.
There's a Thornybush Reserve as well.
Correct, yes. Thornybush Reserve is a separate reserve to the Sabre Sand. And then we are all part of the Greater Kruger National Park. And Sabre Sand is where our home is at Simbambili.
So if you're listening to this from overseas, now you know how all the pieces fit together.
Yes.
And I believe this is also the only Thornybush branded property that is outside of Thornybush Game Reserve.
That is correct, yes. So we feel rather special to be in the Sabre Sands, yes.
Well, it is a very special place. I mean, we've been here for a little bit. We've gotten a feel for the place, and it's been, apart from very hot at this time of the year, it's been beautiful. I mean, the views that we're having from the terrace, and if, as I mentioned, if you're watching this on YouTube, we've gotten a couple of videos that you can also kind of get a feel for the place. You can see where we're sitting, what we're seeing. You might see the odd animal. There might be an impala, might be a kudu that might pop up on the water hole, and you get to see them having a bit of a drink. But at least you kind of get a bit of a feel of where we are right now and where Tania and I are busy having this chat. Tania, tell us a little bit more about the property. What makes it unique? Why should people come here?
So the property has been in existence for many, many years, and the special thing about the Sabe Sand is that the game is comfortable with the Land Rovers, the visitors, the tourists that are coming here. This is something that the animals have been born into. So the sightings that we are experiencing are phenomenal. The animals are so habituated to the lodge industry and what we're offering out there that our sightings are spectacular. We can see the most incredible things happening very close to the vehicles, and you'll see that the animals are relaxed. So that for us is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the game sighting we've had so far has been really impressive, and it's just always such a pleasure. You sometimes start taking these things for granted when you suddenly see all these amazing things, and you think, oh, it's always like this, but it's not. I mean, you really have to pick and choose very carefully where you go and how you go.
Absolutely. And, one day is not the same as another, and as you'll see with our guides, they are as excited as our guests to get out there because every game drive is so unique in the experience. And not only is the game very relaxed with the vehicles, but we've become quite comfortable with the game that we are seeing, and we know what game is out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, and you can see it with a lot of the rangers. There's a lot of working together, and once again, if you've never been on a game drive before, if you're listening to this from overseas, these animals don't sort of just pop up out of nowhere. This is a constantly working, living ecosystem. So if you come across an elephant, you do, and if you don't, you don't. I mean, this is how it works. This is not a staged sort of environment. We're not at the zoo or at the circus where
exactly.
Animals just come out of nowhere. But if you've got a good, skilled ranger, if you've got somebody who understands what they're doing, they know the lay of the land. They know where certain animals sort of spend their time, and they'll make an educated guess as to where to go.
The wonderful thing is that they are in communication with each other, and they follow up what their patterns are, and they know favorite places and which territories are occupied by which leopards. And game drives are obviously designed in such a way to get the maximum out of the time that they're out on safari.
Well, apart from the game drives, I mean, the lodge itself is really beautiful. I mean, we had a look at our rooms, and they are stunning. I mean, they're very contemporary. They've got a touch of African, but very classy, beautifully designed.
Well, the design is done by a lady by the name of Tania Cowden, and she worked very closely with our operations manager at the time, J.B. Berger. And the two of them put together some fabulous ideas and saw what worked and what didn't work, and then made some changes here and there, and the results have been unbelievable. Guests have thoroughly enjoyed it. They've enjoyed the comfort as well as the fact that they are feeling like they're in a luxurious accommodation, and that's just filtered through to all the public facilities as well.
Yeah, very tastefully done, beautifully done. I mean, all the rooms have their own little plunge pool. The bathrooms with a bit of marble, a touch of gold, a touch of sort of earthy colours. The bedroom with you look out onto a sort of a small terrace and then on into the bush. I mean, it's really just beautifully done. And I know there's a bit of a riverbed, which at the moment is a bit dry, but I suppose once the rains fall again, that fills up.
Yes, and the wonderful thing about the rooms is with their private plunge pools at each of the suites, there's also the sala beds, and the sala beds are a fabulous spot just to have a nap in the afternoon or just to lie there and view the game that is going past. The lodge is located, the main facility is opposite the waterhole, which is frequented by game throughout the day, and then the dry riverbed that runs in front of the lodge, we do see it flow usually in the rainy seasons. It can be any time between November and March in that year, and when the river does flow, it appears out of nowhere and then just as quickly as it's appeared out of nowhere, it dries up again. So it's rather exciting for us all, and even though we get to see it every year, it's always exciting the first time it flows in the rainy season.
Well, it sounds like not one visit is the same as another. So if you've been here in winter, come here in summer. And if you have been here in summer, come in winter. It's always something different. It's a living, working environment, which is always, I think, what makes the bush so special as well. And I see we've got some impala that have just rocked up at the waterhole, which looks, I suppose, like the place to be, especially in this heat. Tania, what's changed now that, I suppose, lockdown has eased up a bit? You've now got COVID-19 regulations in place. How have you adapted in terms of running the lodge?
Well, it's been an interesting experience for us all, and I think what's been so important is the fact that we've been able to work as the group, the Thornybush group, and work in relation with the other lodges. We do have a compliance officer that has put together training for our members of our teams and have come to Simbambili to do on-site training, which has been absolutely fabulous. Our protocols, we've tried to move away from paper and get guests to do pre-COVID-19 waivers before their arrival. These have really been of great assistance. And then the PPE, using the correct masks and sanitization stations that are placed all over the lodge. And then the staff that have been trained are not only sanitizing their own hands, they're disinfecting surfaces and following those protocols that have been put in place. For us at Simbambili, one of the biggest changes has been the fact that we've been able to enjoy the local market, which previously we were exposed to international guests, which were absolutely wonderful. But it's been a fabulous experience for us now getting in our South African guests who have been able to travel within the South African border. So that has been delightful. And it's been incredible to see how our guests have arrived and followed those protocols from a guest point of view with the social distancing, so keeping a distance apart from one another, but without it compromising their experience, both on safari and at the lodge.
Well, I must say, it's been a very fluid experience. I suppose the bush lends itself to social distancing. It's not a big lodge. I think you've got about 10, 12 rooms?
We've got 9 rooms also, 18 guests in total.
So you're not here with, a mass of people. This is not a rock concert where you're having to sort of stand in queue everywhere. You've got lovely space. You've got ample room to move around, so you're not feeling claustrophobic, which is wonderful. And I even noticed you even sprayed the soles of our shoes when we arrived, which I thought was quite a new take on sanitization.
Yes, so disinfecting those under your feet to make sure that you're not bringing in anything nasty that you might have stepped into.
Well, I thought that was quite unique, and I hadn't experienced that anywhere else before. But I thought that was quite wonderful. You've also got a really great Africology spas here as well. I mean, when I noticed that when I was reading up before we came here, and I saw, oh wow, you've got an Africology spa. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, we do, and it's beautifully located in the thicket of the bush on the river bank, and we have Maureen as our spa therapist. Absolutely incredible treatments that she offers, massages, facials, pedicures, manicures, you name it, and a guest that chooses to go through to the spa absolutely loves it. And they say it just adds to their experience and relaxation while with us.
Absolutely, and you've also got all the Africology products in the rooms, and if you've never tried the Africology range, it is just to die for. It is absolutely divine. It smells amazing.
It really is.
I mean, when you shower, when you shampoo, I mean, for a guy to say this is quite something, but I mean, it is just one of those amenities that just stand out when you travel somewhere. And I love the fact that you've paid some attention to that detail as well. So you haven't, even with a lot of the sanitary ware in the bathrooms, the tap fittings. I mean, everything is of such great quality. It's a really premium experience, and I think that really stands out in a market that is very competitive as well when it comes to luxury lodges.
I think it is something that has become very popular over the years, and guests have noticed when they've arrived, and it is a product that they do love.
Tania, tell us a little bit more about, you touched on it briefly before, the South African market versus the international market. what was your percentage breakdown before lockdown and before all of this 2020 year happened? How many international visitors did you have before?
Goodness, we had probably, I hope I'm not exaggerating, but probably 90% were from the USA.
Wow.
So really quite different now. A huge percentage from the UK as well, and then Australian guests as well as Canada and New Zealand. But I definitely say our largest market base was from the USA.
And how has running the lodge changed now that you're 100% South African market destination now?
Well, in terms of running the lodge, we run it the same, whether it's international or local. It's just so wonderful to be able to share with South Africans who've grown up in South Africa, our beautiful country. And a lot of South Africans coming here are delighted to be able to have the opportunity to have availability in the lodge where there previously wasn't perhaps availability because the international market were flooding and making all the bookings, and then the rooms weren't available. So many of the South African guests that we see are delighted to have that opportunity. And we are similarly very excited to be able to be open and hosting our South African guests.
Well, I encourage you to take up the offer. Have a look on the websites. I mean, when you get a chance to visit a place like this and you've never been here, I know a lot of people. I was on a game drive not too long ago, and we were chatting about the Sabe Sands area, and someone said to me, no, his business partner, it's been on his bucket list for years, and has never taken the time or the interest to kind of make a plan to come here. And now that the opportunity is there to kind of experience this area, I mean, it's just the best time to make hay while the sun shines, because it's at some point we all know it's probably going to change again, or we're going to go into a next normal or new normal or whatever you want to call it. Have a look at it and make an experience and try it out. Tell us a little bit about the menu here at Simbambili.
While you're with us at Simbambili, we like you to try something local. So while you're with us, we will have a typical bush experience where our meal is prepared over the coals, and we sit in our boma. All our guests love it. It doesn't matter whether you're South African or international, there's nothing better than having a meal prepared on the coals and then to be able to sit around a fire. And although in summer it is really hot, the ambience of a small fire in the middle of the boma is delightful. And then at Simbambili, we are blessed with the most incredible chefs. They put together the most delicious menus, ranging from venison to local favorites. The venison, I believe, at Simbambili is some of the best our guests have tried, with our chefs looking at using impala, kudu, springbok, and they're either using the fillet or the loin and prepare it absolutely beautifully. I've heard from guests they've never had a venison that has been so tender, so it really is good to hear, and I'm very fortunate to have the chefs that we do have in place at Simbambili. Then other favourites, my personal favourite, if I think about tea time, I've got a sweet tooth, so the carrot cake and the chocolate brownies are definitely a favourite for me. But it's not unusual for our guests to request our breakfast muesli recipe, which our chefs are making from scratch with nuts and seeds, and then they're baking it in honey, so it really is delicious. And then we are facing many dietary requirements, which our chefs are absolutely superb at meeting those dietary requirements. But we are finding that vegetarians and vegan options are requested more and more. And one of the dishes that is frequently commented on is the lentil babuti. And I wasn't a favorite of lentil myself, but after trying our chef's lentil babuti, it's definitely opened up my eyes and seen what is out there that can be enjoyed. So lots to say about the culinary delights prepared by our chefs, but I won't bore you to tears. Rather, I'll get you to come to Simbambili and
come and try it yourself. It really is good.
Yeah, I can second what you've said. The food has been really wonderful. It's been really tastefully put together. Everything is very delicious. I mean, I could probably safely say that almost everything is made here. I think probably including the rolls as well, because I don't think there's a bakery close by.
Not at all. Everything is baked here, fresh. And what's so exciting is that we've got a community project not too far from the lodge, and they do lots of our vegetables and our herbs, and it's grown here in the local community and then supplied to us at Simbambili and many of the lodges in the area. And absolutely divine quality and fresh and variety. So we are very, very privileged to have them on our doorstep.
Well, Tania Cowden, Lodge Manager here at Simbambili Game Lodge in the Sabe Sands, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Well, thank you very much for chatting to me. It's been a delight having you at Simbambili.
And it's time for us to have a look at our stories making headlines in Sandton for this week.
This update is brought to you by megaflightdeals.co.za, your one-stop for non-stop cheap flights, and what a great website to visit right now. As international flights open up, local flights increase, you want to get those great deals. There's probably some great offers that are coming up as we speak, so keep an eye on that website, megaflightdeals.co.za. Right, stories making headlines in Sandton for this week. The South African Investment Conference, it's the third annual South Africa Investment Conference, is bringing together business leaders and thought leaders will be engaging on the current plan by the government on how to recover the economy and where the relationship between state and business needs to be worked on. And this will take place between Tuesday 17 November and Wednesday 18 November in Sandton. One of the focus areas will be the implications of the President's Economic Recovery Plan. Then Baldwin Properties announced the 1.6 billion rand Wedgwood lifestyle apartment development for Sandton, a big story this week in Sandton. Baldwin Properties is introducing studio 1 and 2 bedroom lifestyle apartments from 799,000 rand, so just under 800,000 rand. This first of a kind development is unique to the location, and due to the limited capacity and land availability, will be one of the few final iconic high-rise buildings, I would say, to join the Sandton skyline. Some of the key features of the development include they're going to have a coffee shop, business center, kids play area, outdoor cinema, training gym, rooftop five-a-side soccer field, and then some of the key features of the apartments include fiber and DSTV readiness, free Smeg appliances, well, that's going to get the punters in. EDGE certified green building, 24-hour security with biometric access, prepaid meters and electricity and water, and then fully serviced cleaning and laundry facility. So a massive development that's going to be launching, I think, towards the end of November, and is going to be, under construction for quite some time, but we're going to keep an eye on that. But one of the major developments happening in Sandton over the next couple of years. Then, what could US President-elect Joe Biden and Sandton have in common? Well, Cape Talk reports US President-elect Joe Biden's daughter-in-law is South African. Melissa Cohen, who comes from Johannesburg, married Biden's son, Hunter, in 2019, a week after the pair met for the first time. Melissa's mother is a social worker in Johannesburg who specializes in adoptions, and her brother is a podiatrist in Sandton. Small world, that. And then finally, Xbox lit up the Leonardo in green this week. So Xbox Series XS landed with its biggest launch of an Xbox console in South Africa this week. This is the third generation to be launched and the first time that South Africa has been part of the worldwide launch date. And to mark the occasion, the Leonardo, Africa's tallest high-rise or skyscraper, as well as South Africa's tallest building, the Leonardo was lit up in green. So Sandton had a big green Leonardo this week to mark the Xbox launch.
Well, as we carry on, we're joined by Mike Cowden, General Manager and also a Game Ranger here at Simbambili Game Reserve. Mike, great to have you join us on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Well, Mike, tell us a little bit more about what you look after here at the Game Lodge.
Okay, so we've got quite a nice team here, a team of about 50 staff. My kind of side of it is the staff management and then obviously maintenance and that kind of side. So that's what I'll be doing.
And there's plenty of maintenance to be done, I'm sure, especially during lockdown?
Yes, definitely. Well, lockdown, we kind of shut everything down. We had to close the whole lodge down. But yeah, we still had maintenance, so we still had to look after the pools, had to do that kind of stuff, yeah.
And did you find that the animals caused a bit of havoc while everyone was away, or did they kind of stick to their own corner of Sabe Sands?
They kind of left us alone. We spent a lot of time, I did a lot of walking. During lockdown, we kind of did patrols because there was no activity out in the bush, so we spent most mornings out walking, and then in the afternoons maybe once or twice a week we'd go on a drive just to make sure that nothing funny was happening on the property.
And you've been open again since August now?
Yes.
And how's the uptake been? I mean, you've had mostly South Africans coming to visit now.
100% South Africans. Yeah.
Yep.
So we've had no foreigners at all. Yeah, and great. I mean, we're running at about 50-60%. So it's been a real good period. Obviously, a different rate, but it's actually nice to have South Africans. Yeah, it's been actually fun. We were always running at 99% foreign. So to have what we have now is actually very special.
Well, on that point, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to mention to people that it's a fantastic time to come to the Sabe Sands. I mean, geez, at the rates you guys are doing right now, if you've never been here, if it's been on your bucket list of places to come to.
Exactly, yeah, use us while you can. I mean, we're pretty much going to keep our special rate till June, so use us.
Yeah. Mike, what makes the Sabe Sands such an attractive place to come to? People always say, game reserve is a game reserve is a game reserve, it's the same animals, but there is something special about this place.
No, there's no doubt. Look, the Sabe Sands has been going for probably about 80 years all in all, so these animals that we view have pretty much been born next to the side of the vehicle. So your experiences, we will be right in the middle of things that go on, things that are happening. To give you an idea, I think it was about 3 or 4 days ago, we had a young leopard climb into a red-billed buffalo weaver nest and was actually trying to take little babies out of the nest. And while this was happening, we had an elephant below the tree wallowing, all in the same sighting. And we were probably 5 meters. We actually got sprayed by the mud. That's how close we get into. They just don't care about us. We're just there to view.
Well, unbelievable. I mean, this morning we spent some time on the morning drive, and we hadn't even gotten our coffee fully digested, and we were already in the middle of a hunt with wild dog and hyenas. Yeah. The wild dogs and the hyenas were going at each other. Then the wild dog caught, I think it was a little daker, yeah? And all hell broke loose. And we were in the middle of this, this onslaught. It was just unbelievable. I've never seen that anywhere else before. And I suppose you get lucky, but...
No, sure. No, there was luck involved, but yeah, we were able to actually get right into the middle of it and have them running around us. The hyenas and wild dog interaction was unbelievable. Yeah, so and that little daker didn't last too long.
Shame, yeah. And it goes so quickly. Yeah. It's amazing.
It's a very quick kill.
And I think people underestimate on that point. I always find that people are always looking out for the leopard and the lion and the big five, but don't miss out on the wild dog.
No,
an endangered species and a fascinating animal. The way they hunt, the speed at which they operate.
And efficiency.
Amazing.
80% success rate. So.
Really. So if you're listening to this, you've never been to the bush, you might be from overseas, you might be looking forward to coming back to South Africa at some point, make a point of asking your ranger to go see wild dog. If they've got wild dog on the property, if you can find them, don't miss out on this. Don't get caught up with the zebras and the the leopards and everything. No. Go check out the wild dogs. But Mike, another thing I must say, it's a scorcher at the moment. The heat is what, like 40 plus?
Yeah, I think yesterday was 44. Today's, I think, going to be 42, 43.
Incredible. How long does that go on for?
Well, these are build-up, so we're in a kind of high pressure at the moment. So we're getting, I can assume, looking out into the horizon out there, I think we'll probably get rain either today or tomorrow. So it builds up like this, then we have rain which cools it down, and then we get the build-up. So this is our summer kind of weather.
And that runs until what, like end of February?
February, March. Yeah.
Wow, okay. Yeah. And then we go into the winter months, which are sort of the cooler months. If you quite heat opposed, it feels like kind of game ranging in Dubai, almost.
Exactly, yeah.
The temperatures. I know the winter months are always fantastic time to come around as well, to come see some game.
Look, it's also cooler, like you say, and also the bush is more open. The bush has got a different feel to it. It's more grey. There's not that many, not much leaf. So you can see further into the bush as well in winter. But from a photography point of view, the greenery and that kind of really is a better time to take photographs. Is definitely your summer months.
Yeah.
Winter, it's dull. It's hard to make a nice picture because of the dull grey, browny looks that you get, backgrounds.
And you must have some fantastic stories to share in terms of stuff that you've seen, things you've experienced. Maybe you can pick one or two of your most memorable moments that you've had out in the bush.
Look, we with the lockdown, we spent a lot of time on foot. Myself and my guides that were with me at the time, so there were 3 or 4 of us on a walk. We ended up sitting on top of a termite mound when a herd of elephants kind of circled us. And we just sat very, very quietly. They had no idea we were there. they could smell us. They knew there was something that was happening, but they couldn't figure out where we were because we kind of looked like the little chimneys of the termite pond. We eventually had the matriarch come through, and she picked us up. Now you can imagine 30-odd elephants around us. The noise that was going on, it was this crunching and eating, and there's just that movement. The minute this matriarch picked us up, the whole herd just went dead. It was just the most amazing experience. She was actually telling them that there was something going on. She knew something was happening, but she couldn't find out where it was, and she kind of looked around, looked straight at us actually, but still couldn't pick us out because we were sitting, so we don't look like a feature, like a human feature. Realized that there was no threat, started moving again, and that whole 30 elephants started moving again. It was really, really special just to get that dead silence of her communication to the rest of the herd.
Well, somebody was mentioning this on one of the game drives, that there is sort of an unknown to human communication that happens. I don't know if it's just with elephants, but with a lot of animals. There's obviously the audio that we hear.
From an elephant point of view, that we probably only hear about 30-40% of elephants' audio. The rest is so low frequency that our ears can't pick it up.
Incredible.
So there are cases where it will actually travel through their feet, through the ground, and also through their trunks. They can communicate up to, I think it's about 20-odd k's. So there's this continuous communication going around that we have no idea.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, I really encourage anyone listening to this, make some time, put it as part of a birthday or an anniversary, if you need to give it a name, and come down to the Sabe Sands, come down to Simbambili. It's been absolutely fantastic, and you've been hosting us beautifully here.
Thank you.
We're having a great time so far, so thank you so much for having us.
Absolute pleasure.
Right, time for our weekly business update. So COVID-19 has had a major impact on businesses in South Africa, but more specifically individuals have taken a hit, and people were stuck with salary cuts, retrenchments, and in turn being unable to service their debts. With this came the fall of GDP, which worsened unemployment, and consumers were forced to reprioritize their income. And according to the National Income Dynamics Study, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown on the South African jobs market shows that none of the approximately 3 million lost since the onset of the pandemic had returned by June. With this in mind, I thought it would be a good idea to invite Ramona Singh, Administration Director and Registered Debt Counsellor at Infinite Life, on the podcast. Ramona, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.
I think, Ramona, as we kick off, give me a bit of a sense of how bad is it out there? I mean, from where you're sitting, what have you seen?
Wow, Alex. 2020, definitely a year that many of us are not going to forget. We've seen job losses, we've seen salary cuts, we've seen people trying to hang on to every last cent that they have, deciding to put food on the table, trying to safeguard their assets, falling behind terribly in this times of no work and no pay and no other source of income. With that, Alex, we saw many of our consumers in a rather vulnerable position where it was a choice. Do we put food on the table, clothes on our kids' backs, or do we pay our debt? So we've seen some really challenging situations at the moment, yeah.
Was there also a sense of people maybe living too close to the waterline, that things were fine whilst everyone was earning an income, and the moment those incomes were reduced or cut completely, suddenly the whole house of cards collapsed?
100%. The lack of financial planning definitely showed in this time when people were suddenly chopped with the lockdown, no work, no pay, nothing to fall back on, people digging into their very little savings that they had left over, and some seen with no savings at all. So definitely that house of cards tumbled down terribly.
And maybe just to kind of also just alleviate some preconceptions that I think often people have, is that people who get into debt are not necessarily just people who are earning minimum wage or who are making it by on a month-to-month basis. This is also often the wealthy and people who live in estates and are earning, multi-digit income, not just just a few thousand rand.
That's so true, Alex. I deal with customers of different LSMs, levels of markets, different incomes, different responsibilities, different priorities, different assets to safeguard as well. And this pandemic and the lockdown
the loss of jobs income has affected not just the lower incomes, the middle incomes, it's the high income earners as well. When their businesses closed or had to shut down during that forced lockdown, there was no other income. They were digging into savings, they were looking at options, and people were just left in a ramble.
It sounds quite rough, and I'd be quite interested to hear from you. How do you even start to tackle these debts? I mean, what is a priority, what isn't? Where do you start managing this entire situation until you get to a point that everyone's sort of back on track with their finances?
We assess your situation on an individual level. So what we do is we have a consultation with you, right? We look at where you are currently, what is going on in your budget, okay? We assess your credit record, we look at your living expenses, we look at your income, and then we say, right, let's prioritize, like you're saying. Let's look at where our assets lie. Let's look at this. Let's look at how far behind we are with our payments. And then we look at a budget that could be suitable to you as an individual and still satisfy your credit agreements. Okay, we have the ability to renegotiate your interest rates and your installments with your creditors, in turn allowing you to live more comfortably as an individual with your budget now restructured, giving you some breathing space, giving you that fresh air that you desperately needed, safeguarding your assets and still helping you towards a debt-free future.
It does come with a sense of having to make some sacrifices. I mean, this is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. This is, I mean, you're going to have to live a little bit more, I suppose, conservatively.
Right. It's called now living within your means. Because not only that's what it is. It's just restructuring your budget. Because so often we know that, hey, we're getting a salary of this in the month. We know that we could spend half of that, if not more, towards our debt. And then when suddenly things go boom, we have no savings, nothing left over. So no, it's not a get out of jail free card. You still meeting your credit obligations and you still being able to live. It's just a more committed payment plan to see you through these difficult times.
Now, one of the other things I think that a lot of people struggle with when they get into these situations is that naturally, once the payments start lapsing, somebody starts phoning and asking, are these payments coming through? Are you going to pay your account? And that can, I suppose, psychologically become a little bit of a burden because you're in, you're down the creek without a paddle. How do you even start managing that?
Well, we all hate to receive those calls, and we know that those calls come at on any given time of the day. So once we have an agreement with the client in place, a notification of debt management is sent out to that specific creditors. And once this is acknowledged by the creditor, all communication regarding that consumer is then directed to Infinite Life. Okay, and there's no need then for the creditor to contact consumer. All conversations will then be directed to Infinite Life, who then takes over this consumer's profile and deals with the creditors. As a result, the creditor is far less stressed and can focus more on the rehabilitation and building process, Alex.
So what's the final outcome? I mean, once if they've gotten through this process, their finances are back up to date, do you find that people come out... I mean, I hate to use the word rehabilitated, but do you find that they proceed with life more cautiously, or do they tend to lapse back into maybe bad finance habits? And how does it also impact their efforts to find employment? Because I know, for example, I think if you've got any bad debt issues, you can't go into a finance position, or you can't go into a position where you have to manage money. So how does that work?
Correct. Our motto is to train you, not just to put into a payment plan, but also to guide you for future so that you don't relapse and go back down the same road where you've been now. So with drawing up our realistic budgets, we show you, we coach you on how to manage your money more effectively. So when dark days come back, we know we've got some sort of plan compared to where we were previously and just leading in blindly. But in terms of starting off on a clean slate, yes, definitely. It's definitely got a positive impact, because now you're more aware of your situations. You're more aware of, hey, do I actually need to use this credit card, or can I just save for 2 months and then make the purchase? And in terms of an employment, most definitely has a positive impact. Once the debt review flagged is removed off the client's credit profile, which is therefore viewed positively, because it means we've now satisfied all of our debt, we're completely debt free, and once the client has completed that rehabilitation process, technically they are on a clean slate. Okay, and that debt review flag is removed. You now open to the credit world again, and we hope by then, your time that you've spent with us, we've managed to educate you enough to not go down the same route and find yourself in the same spot where you were previously.
Well, Ramona Singh, I think you're still going to have some busy months ahead. I mean, we've got Black November or Black Friday or whatever it is that they're calling it this year, and Christmas coming up, and then there's the school fees that are due in January next year. So I think it's going to be quite hectic. But thank you so much for joining us. She's the Administration Director and Registered Debt Counsellor at Infinite Life. So, the Sandton Times is excited to welcome legal advisors NL Legal Services to its weekly podcast in a segment titled LawCast. Every week, we'll explore matters that affect your business, topical issues, and compliance matters that you should know about. And I'm thrilled to kick off this segment this morning with Nicole Lokadasen. Well, Nicole, good to have you on. And let's get into it. Tell us a little bit more about NL Legal Services.
Firstly, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to do this. I'm the owner of NL Legal. It's a legal consulting firm. We focus on business legal compliance. So we have clients who are small, medium, and micro businesses. And our service areas are within the sectors of corporate, commercial, and labor law. So we focus on anything to do with those aspects.
So what makes your services so different to what a lot of people know sort of in the market? Because usually you have some legal issues at the office, or you have a legal issue in your business, you sort of phone up a law firm, and it can also become quite a costly exercise. So how does that make the NL Legal Services different?
You are correct in saying it is a very costly exercise. So the difference with us is we believe that prevention is better than cure. So we are not here to cure a problem when it occurs. We're here to prevent it as much as we can. So we will put measures in place according to your business goals and what it requires and where it needs to be. We are there to basically put all the legal measures in place to help you achieve your business goals.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, so this is sort of companies who would not necessarily have the budget or the resources to have a permanent legal counsel maybe in their office. This would be an opportunity to kind of almost outsource that to yourselves, and you would be able to assist with sort of the everyday stuff. What would that include?
Yeah, that would include things like drafting or reviewing your company policies. So you have a disciplinary code, you have disciplinary action that needs to be taken, any sexual harassment matters that come up, anything that happens in the workplace. If it's things like entering into a partnership agreement or leasing out property for your business, whatever the case may be, if it is legal, if there is a legal aspect, we are there.
Right. And then you would just sort of, invoice your client on a sort of project by project basis, not sort of an ongoing retainer, or would it be an opportunity also to take on something a bit more long term?
That depends on the client and what they require. If there is something that requires ongoing assistance, then we are there on a retainer basis. Sometimes this is more beneficial because our packages are put together in such a way that it is suitable for the client according to their costs and what they can afford and what they need for their business. So we are available on a retainer basis as well as on an ad hoc basis as and when needed.
So, Nicole, when you meet with a lot of your clients, you were mentioning small to medium-sized businesses, micro businesses, do you find that kind of a lot of companies put legal matters sort of to the side, or they kind of try and MacGyver it, and it ends up becoming a bit of a mess as opposed to kind of just doing it properly the first time around?
Yes, and I think the reason for this is because, as we said in the beginning, it's an expensive task, and I think they would rather just Google a document, get it off the internet, change it, and think that everything is right, and until they fall into some problem, and then they realize I should have actually had legal representation, someone who has a legal background to actually do the work for me, and this would have been prevented. And I think that is one of the big issues with companies.
And I guess, you sort of think you're spending or you're saving yourself a little bit of money, and meanwhile it's actually going to end up costing you quite a bit more.
Way more. If you look at it, for example, if I had a small company on retainer, they would probably pay between, say, 3,000. It ranges from 3,000 to 10,000 per month based on what their needs are. But if a matter had to go to litigation, so if it had to go to court, it would be way more than 10,000 rand to settle a matter or to have a matter finalized in court. So it is better to have legal advice before entering into any legal agreement. And I think companies don't realize that there are consequences for every action, every agreement that they enter into, there are consequences. And that just becomes a problem later on.
So, Nicole, if somebody's listening right now and they're thinking, you know what, I've got most of my house in order, we've, sort of patch this thing together. What are some of the things where you're seeing most companies sort of fall short that they might not even be aware of? I mean, what are you seeing at the moment come across your desk?
At the moment, and I think this is with the pandemic that has occurred, many businesses are in a state of disaster. They do not know what to do, and it's a matter of trying to run their business and trying to make ends meet. And a lot of businesses have retrenched their employees, or they've dismissed their employees and they are unable to pay them, or they just tell them that they'll call them when they have work. And a lot of times these companies are actually not following procedures with regard to labor laws. And I think that is a big issue at the moment with the current situation that we are facing. The other thing that I've seen come up is, and again, because of the pandemic, a lot of businesses have gone online. And with that comes a lot of laws that not a lot of people know about. Things like the POPI Act and protection of personal information on websites, and when making EFT payments and having security in place. A lot of companies go the short way around instead of actually having proper legal security in place.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on over the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. We're going to be unpacking quite a few different issues that you might be aware of, and issues that a lot of people might not be aware of, that they didn't even realize was an issue until we might be discussing it. So that's kind of what we're going to be covering in this LawCast segment. And if you're listening right now, I really encourage you to then also share it with people that you think might find some value in this, that might find this interesting as well. I mean, I'm just having a look at some of the things that we've noted here. We're going to be looking at indemnity forms, liability of businesses regarding COVID, the Consumer Protection Act, which is also something that keeps coming up. Then I know early on next year there's going to be a flood of people wanting to get gym contracts, and some of the landmines that we're going to have to keep out an eye out there. Then copyright policies as well. I know there's quite a bit happening there. And social media policies. I think during COVID everybody ran onto, like you said, online. There was a lot happening on social media, but there's quite a bit that needs to happen when it comes to sharing content, putting up content, running competitions. So, Nicole, I really look forward to exploring all of these elements with you.
Me as well, Alex. I cannot wait to discuss all of these topics that we've chosen. And I think it is really going to be helpful for anyone that listens.
So, Nicole, if anyone's listening right now and they said, look, I've heard enough, I'd be really keen to explore, some of the services that you offer. How do they get hold of NL Legal Services?
Okay, so my website is www.nllegal.co.za. All the information is on the website. My email address is nicolel@nllegal.co.za. On social media, all our social handles are NL Legal. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. We also have an online store. So if anyone wants to purchase a legal agreement, can do it online. and that comes with a free 30-minute consultation as well. So everything's made easy.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, that's something to pick up straight away if you're listening. So you've gone digital as well.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's the name of the game at the moment. Nicole Lokadasen, NL Legal Services, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you on the podcast next week for our first fully fledged LawCast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Right, we're still in Simbambili Game Lodge, and sitting right opposite me now is Sabre Meeser. Sabre, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you're a game ranger here at Simbambili. How long have you been doing this for?
Well, I've been here at Simbambili for 4 years now, just about 4 years, but I was very fortunate to actually just grow up in this environment. My parents are both game rangers. My brother's a game ranger, so I'm not sure exactly where it started, probably before I was even legal to guide, but I've been doing it from a very young age, lived here my whole life, been doing it my whole life pretty much.
I found that fascinating because I must say, in all our travels, it's the first time I've come across a female game ranger. It's not a common thing, is it?
Alex, it's becoming a much, much more common thing in South Africa especially. I know in places in Botswana as well, in Chobe, there's areas where there are only female guides. But it's becoming more and more common throughout South Africa, and I think we've got it a lot easier now than what female guides before us had it. I think it was a bit trickier then, but it's becoming a lot more appropriate, and I think people handle it a lot better than what they used to.
Do you feel that women bring a unique angle to the guiding experience? Maybe that men don't?
Yes, absolutely. I think, I've read up quite a lot about it as well, because obviously a lot of other female rangers have had interviews as well, and I think the best way to put it is that, females are a little bit more sensitive and they pick up on a little bit more than perhaps male rangers don't sometimes. I like to see that there's not that much of a difference. I think we can handle things that the men can handle too.
And maybe you also take slightly more calculated risks.
Yes,
where
sometimes,
I'm sure your colleagues
yes.
probably take a Range Rover or a Land Rover into the ditch a bit more than they possibly should.
I can't say I haven't done that, but yes.
So for you, you're second generation a ranger. I mean, you were saying your parents are still in the business.
Yes.
Your brother's in the business as well.
Yes.
That must be quite an interesting Christmas lunch or Christmas dinner when you guys all get together.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, growing up in a lodge, going home for Christmas means I'm just going to another lodge and sitting around having Christmas with a bunch of guests, as I would at work, but at least it means we are with our family. But I couldn't think of another way of growing up. I think we were extremely fortunate, my brother and I think it speaks volumes that we are both we've picked the same career that my parents have, growing up in that environment, and now we're doing exactly what we saw them doing our whole life.
And was that also one of the motivators for you to get into this? Because so often kids look at their parents' careers and go, there is no way I'm ever going to do that. I'm going to go do something. I want to become an accountant.
Yes,
I'm going to become a lawyer.
Yes. Honestly, for me, I don't think there was any question about it. I think I knew from a very, very young age, growing up in this environment, and just, I'm so in love with it. I just love the bush. I couldn't see myself living anywhere else or doing anywhere else, being anywhere else. That at this point it's more of just it's a lifestyle, not necessarily a career. And I think doing a different career in this lifestyle, it wouldn't be as fun. And the unpredictability of the bush is just what keeps us going all the time. You come around a corner, you don't know what you're going to find there, and that's what makes it so magic.
Well, on that note, you must have some really interesting stories of stuff that you've seen while you've been out of the bush. Maybe you can share some of those.
Oh, goodness, geez, it's a tricky one to remember, growing up here and thinking about what you see. But the excitement's always there. I think here inside our lodge, we've been fortunate that we see so much inside our camp as well. I've walked into camp in the morning and there was a young leopardess actually picking up our pillows and taking them down below the deck and kind of creating a little nest for herself. So she'd been dropped off by her mom almost to be babysat here in the lodge, and we found her just before our coffee picking up all of our pillows and taking them down below our deck. So, and lots of wildlife in and around the camp, which is always surprising because it's not where you expect to see it.
For people who've never done the safari experience, who are kind of looking at South Africa, hoping everything reopens fairly soon, they might be planning their first safari into Africa, what kind of advice can you give people that are looking to to go out and experience the bush? What are they expecting from a game ranger? What should they be looking out for? Sort of almost like a little bit of a quick pick beginner's guide to going out on a drive.
Well, I think the first thing is, the best thing to do is just have no expectations. I've found that a lot of my guests that arrive that say, oh, we're just happy to see whatever we see, somehow those are the ones that get the best sightings, because they're just happy to get whatever comes their way. And I think that's a very important thing to do, is just, be willing to see whatever comes your way. And also, I think it's very important that people do still come back to South Africa into our industry. Given everything that's going on with COVID, we're in a tricky spot at the moment. And of course, that is going to affect the environment, and we need tourism. It's a huge part of our country. It's what a large portion of the country relies on. Lots of people, but also the animals. And people coming here is actually what's keeping these game reserves alive and what's keeping them going. It's very easy to just take a game reserve away and create something else there that's going to, make more money, unfortunately. But as long as people keep coming to the bush, you are ultimately what's keeping it here and keeping the wilderness alive for the animals that live here.
Well, you've touched on it now, and I think it's worth picking up on it. Majority of the business here at Simbambili has been very much international tourists up until now. You're now seeing virtually 100% South African guests coming in, maybe experiencing it for the first time,
Yes.
coming to the Sabe Sands.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding that guiding South African visitors is very different to maybe guiding your American or your French tourist? They've maybe already got a bit of a feel for the bush. They've already got some sort of experience.
Definitely. I think a lot of the South Africans that we have here are avid safari goers. They've been to the bush many, many times. And I think originally we were all a little bit nervous about that, all the guides in the area. Now we're having South Africans. We weren't used to guiding South Africans anymore. And we thought, geez, what are they going to expect? But I think it's been a very welcome surprise and a welcome change. And we've loved having South Africans because of the appreciation. People come to Kruger Park, they come for a weekend, they come for a week. Sometimes you see nothing. So when you do manage to show them the spectacular sighting, they really, really appreciate it. So I think it's actually been great having South Africans come here, and we've been able to touch on knowledge that we have that previously you weren't able to, because you've got to get the big five out of the way, and I love the appreciation that South Africans have when they're coming to the bush.
Well, Sabre Meeser, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for taking us around. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Right, joining me on the line right now, another member of the team is Candice Grover. She's the head of community for Thornybush. Candice, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And to kick it off, what does a head of community do at Thornybush?
Well, thanks for having me, Alex. We really focus on how we can make social and positive impacts in both the surrounding communities who are adjacent to the Thornybush and Sabe Sand reserves, as well as add positive impact to our own team members.
All right, that's sort of a two stakeholder setup that you've got going there. Why is it so important to have this proactive community involvement, both with your team but also with the people that surround a lot of your property?
Well, I think, many of these community members really rely on their natural spaces to provide food, create energy, livelihoods for themselves, for their family members and their communities as well. I strongly believe participation with these communities and community businesses is really essential in the protection of the protected game reserves. We don't only need to look at conserving, but we need to ensure that by doing so, we are creating opportunities and benefits for social upliftment and really creating a mutually beneficial relationship.
Well, I think for people who are not familiar with a lot of the sort of setup around most lodges, if you've traveled in South Africa extensively, you probably are familiar with it, even if you go into the northwest, if you go into, many different places. You have a lot of communities that start developing or are already there that end up becoming potential future employees for these lodges, who have small businesses that supply a lot of these lodges. So you can see how this starts becoming a very symbiotic relationship. The bigger the lodges become, the more happens there, the bigger the communities become around these lodges. And I think during lockdown, this must have been particularly interesting, because when everything came to a grinding halt, a significant amount of that economy in those communities must have also just stopped.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really had to become agile. We had to dramatically reduce our costs with many of our projects. For an example, one of the micro enterprises that we work with was very successfully supplying fresh produce to many of the luxury lodges. Overnight, these lodges obviously were closed and the demand went with it. So, we really had to find innovative ways overnight, looking for new ways to survive. A lot of the projects, for instance, the sewing project, turned to making masks to sell to both the informal and formal markets. And a lot of the enterprises who focus on agriculture turned to supplying food parcels. Yeah, we all very quickly had to learn to adapt, how to use Zoom. But I will say we're pretty well known for being a resilient nation, and I think our rural communities are a testament to that.
I just wanted to ask you, maybe we can flesh that out a little bit more in terms of, that economic relationship. So on the one hand, you're using a lot of the communities as a base to supply you with fresh produce. I mean, you can maybe give us a bit more detail on what that is. And then on the other hand, there's a proactive entry into the community with funded projects that aren't necessarily of an economic nature, but there's some sort of activity that you're doing, and maybe you can also just give us an idea of what that is.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, we have a couple of focus key areas. A big focus for us as Thornybush as a business is where we spend our money. So we have a buy local initiative, which, as I say, is very important to us, not only because it generates local circular economy in our area, but it also generates business and economic opportunities for the small businesses, which in essence, promotes societal benefits. We also assist with small, medium and micro enterprises with market access channels. And that's really done through mentorship and leveraging Thornybush as a brand and our reputation with our fellow luxury lodges. Again, this is an important initiative as it can create long-term sustainable income for these small rural local businesses. And then some, initiatives that we've been involved in is assisting with infrastructure upgrades in government schools. And an important one for me is the facilitation of access for school learners and community members to visit the reserve and actually experience the wonderful natural areas. And then, further from that, we're very proud to partner with a number of other local NPO partners covering a whole range of different focus areas, from healthcare to early child development, some conservation efforts, and even skills development. And our main role there is helping to channel funding.
How significant are the skills and employment that these lodges bring to these local communities?
Wow. I think, sure, it is significant. For context purposes, the Greater Kruger National Park has roughly 230 lodges, employing close on about 25,000 people and generating close on about 5 billion rand in income per year. So the operators have of an estimate of about 54 million rand per year of procurement expenditure, of which 75% of that is spent in our local province. However, only about 24% of that is spent with some or our BEE-owned companies. But there's a great effort and investment going into our local SMMEs to allow them to better enter into the tourism supply chain. And there's some wonderful project aimed at upskilling our youth and in the environmental tourism sector. When you look at our province as an example, we have the second highest unemployment rate in South Africa, with the average household supporting around six people with generally only one breadwinner. So I think it goes without saying the local communities are pretty heavily reliant on the tourism industry.
Candice Grover, she's the head of community for Thornybush. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, it's time for us to get into our events guide for this week, and it kicks off with Milk and Honey Bar at Monte Casino. They're introducing their summer session with DJ Milkshake every Friday from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m, and bookings are essential. Then Tiger's Milk Bryanston, it's the weekend shakedown this Saturday and Sunday from 7 p.m. Katie's Palace Bar is hosting Art Sunday Brunch on November 15th, featuring Carl Kassam and more. Book through Howler. Rockets in Bryanston is hosting Ricky Rick, Shimza and Sitelo the DJ on November 14th. Then Radisson Blue Hotel Sandton have Sunrise Pilates from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. on November 14th, and booking is essential. Altitude Beach Club Fourways 10-year anniversary takeover of Spring Fiesta this weekend, featuring Shimza, Mikasa, DJ Fresh, DJ Kent, and many, many more. Entrance is 200 Rand, and the party starts at 12 midday. Then the Greenhouse in Rosebank, this Saturday, November 14th, it's DJ Abby Newrock on the decks, joined by Kathy Delmay on saxophone from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And the Grand Rivonia, trading Monday to Sundays from 12 noon to midnight. Entrance fee includes food and is 750 Rand. And that's your events guide for this week. It's also your podcast episode for this week. The Sandton Times bows out as we finish another week. We're off to our next destination, but if you want to get in touch, don't forget to email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on Telegram and social media using @SandtonTimes. Visit the blog www.sandtontimes.co.za and subscribe, share, and leave a review or rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, SoundCloud. Hit the like button on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've been enjoying some of the visuals you've been catching today. Thank you to all my guests for today. It's been a packed show. We're halfway through November, and international travel is opening up. Let's see what that brings and how things pick up. I welcome back many of our cabin crew and airline listeners as they return to Sandton, which is super exciting. I look forward to connecting as we continue our travels in and around South Africa. But thanks for listening, and let's chat again next week.